If you're using a native development system, at this point you might have to install Git, and you should refer to the text for a link. But it's already included here in the Cloud IDE. We can use the which command to find out where it is, which Git. So this shows us that it exists. You can say git -v. I think actually this won't work. Yeah, unknown option -- version will work. Now your results here may vary. The exact version number isn't that important. But we see that Git is in fact installed on this system. Before using Git for our project, there's some one-time system setup that we have to do. So first we're going to configure the name and email address associated with our Git changes, called commits. The way to do this is with the git config command. This is a global change, and we're going to say user.name. In this case, it'll be me. And then the same thing, I can do up arrow, user.email, and then here I'll do my main email address. Oh, now interestingly, I just realized I used quotes here, and I'm not sure if that's exactly the same. So let's take a look at this. I'll use the less command to take a look at the git config. Is this it? Yeah, here we go. So that did work. You can actually omit the quote marks there around the email address, but it worked just fine. So you can see here, this is actually where Git keeps its configuration. It's a little file in the home directory, tilde, called .gitconfig. So it's hidden. That dot means it's a hidden file in Unix. So that's set up, and now actually we can see this here. You can see the editor here is user bin nano. So nano is a very simple editor. It's not a very powerful editor, but it's really easy to use, so we'll adopt it as our default. Let's set it up. So you can see which nano. Notice that this disagrees. This says user bin nano, and this says /bin/nano, bin nano. I'm not sure why that's the case, and this might have changed by the time you're watching this. But in order to get things to work, we actually have to set up what's called a symbolic link between where Git thinks nano is and where it actually is. Now, the way to make a symbolic link is with the ln command, link, and then -s for symbolic. I want to overwrite it if it exists, so I'm going to say F for force, although it should work either way. And then I can actually, in this command, have which nano in backticks. This is not important to understand, but this is just a nice little technique. We just saw what which nano was. Which nano is bin nano. So this is going to link /bin/nano to the actual place where we want it. We're going to link it into the user bin directory. This is where Git thinks it is. Now this won't work. It's going to say permission denied. So this is an important trick to know. This is sudo. This says do it as the super user. It's actually technically substitute user do, but the default substitute user is the super user, also known as root, which can do anything on the system, including write which nano to this directory. So now if we do which nano, user bin nano. If we do ls-l, that's the long form of listing. We can see that it's actually a link to /bin/nano. I'm including these as a special bonus for the screencasts, but these are not details that are particularly important to know for Ruby on Rails web development. All right, the next step is to make one more configuration. It's optional, but it's really convenient. One of the things that Git is really good at doing is making branches, kind of like branches on a tree, where you can have a separate line of development that can then get merged back into the main trunk of the code. We'll see how to do this later in this section. Now the command to switch to a branch is called git checkout. And that's a lot to type, so it's very common to set up what's called an alias, just a shortcut, so that you can type git co instead of git checkout. In this tutorial, I'll mainly type git checkout just for maximum compatibility, but this configuration is so common that you will often encounter people typing git co, and it's important to know how they set that up. There's one final bit of configuration, which is to set Git to remember any passwords we type in. As we'll see later in this section, we're going to be storing our source code on a remote server, And it's nice not to have to type our password in every time we want to access that code. The way to do this is with a global configuration for credential.helper. We'll set a cache with a timeout of 86,400 seconds, which is 1 day. So that's the end of the one-time setup. Now we're going to do some setup for this repository specifically. We're already there. I can print working directory, pwd. You can see here we are, hello app. This prompt also has hello app, right here. And it's actually configured to show what's called the master branch. This is very convenient. Most systems don't come pre-configured like this, so if you're on a native system, you might not see this. This little detail is covered in Learn Enough Git to be dangerous. The first step is to set up our project as a Git repository with Git init. That's to initialize the repository. You can see here that Git stores everything that it does in a special directory called .git. It's a hidden directory, as indicated by the dot. We don't see it here, but ls-a list all does show it. And now we're going to add all of the files in our project. We'll do git add -A. Some people do git add dot, where dot indicates the current directory. And that's not quite the same thing. And in the rare cases where they differ, this is actually the one you want. So I recommend doing git add -A to add everything. And we can see the effect of that with git status. You can see here, we just added a bunch of new files. It says no commits yet. So let's make a commit. This tells Git about our changes. It bundles all of these changes into one package and says we want to make these a single commit to a single set of changes that are all related. We'll give Git a message with -m, and then here let's say initialize repository. We can use git log to see the effect. And there's the commit, initialize repository, and it's identified by a so-called SHA. At this point, our system and our project are fully configured to use Git.